So who is regulated by the DSA? Well, to determine who is regulated, you need to look at three distinct issues. First, is the service an information society service, which is essentially all services that are provided as an economic activity at distance electronically? Second, is it a regulated service that fits one of the four categories and hence qualifies to be an intermediary service? And then finally, is the service provided to Europeans in a way that triggers the application of a DSA? So the second step, is this a regulated service, is the most complicated one, because that requires us to think about the technical functioning of the services. So it's not about a product, it's not about a business models, it's about a technological activity that is performed by the provider. So for instance, you can have a social media site that is regulated not because there's a description of a social media site in the law, but because social media site performs storing of other people's information. But storing of other people's information is also performed by app stores or other products. So DSA the scope is decided by looking at a technical activity, not the products, not the business models. So what are the technical activities? Well, first of all, it's mere conduits. Those are the infrastructure services that give access or transmit other people's information at their request. So typically internet access providers, open Wi-Fi and similar. Caching services are providers that temporarily transmit other people's information at their request to improve the safety and effectiveness of the transmission. So typically these are caching services like Akamai or content delivery networks like Cloudflare. The most important one are hosting services, because hosting services are designed very broadly as basically any services that store other people's information at their request. And you can imagine that many services can be described as storing other people's information at their request. In the DSA, we regulate hosting services, but we also regulate a subset of hosting services through more stringent rules, and those services are called online platforms. And online platforms are defined as hosting services that also distribute information to the public as their main feature. Meaning that if you have a service that stores and disseminates information to the public, it's an online platform, and it will be regulated more stringently in certain circumstances. Finally, we have search that is regulated in a very special way through the DSA, but search, what is understood as search, is only generally search because you need to perform searches on all the websites. So those are the regulated activities that fall under the DSA, which is why when you look back at this picture and look at the ecosystem, you can see that hosting services covered the biggest part of the ecosystem, and those services that have these little stars, if you can see them, these are online platforms. Many of them are online platforms because they distribute information to the public, but some aren't. They're only regulated as hosting services. And then mere conduit services mostly cover the infrastructure along with caching services. Most of the content moderation obligations will apply to hosting services. Most of the risk management obligations will apply to online platforms. And transparency will apply to everything, but it will in particular, as the only main obligation, apply to infrastructure services. So if you want to think about a DSA and its structure, you need to think about a sort of a cake structure, where the bottom two layers are obligations that apply to all services that fall under one of these categories. These are intermediary obligations, where the rules are mostly about the terms and conditions, contact points, and transparency. Then hosting services, those that store information of other people at their request, they have certain obligations related to content moderation, how they receive notices, and how they decide and explain the decisions, because these services have to engage in content moderation to avoid being liable. And then we have the tier that only applies to online platforms, but also only applies to online platforms that are operated by at least mid-sized companies, which in Europe are companies that have at least 10 million euros turnover or 50 employees. So if you are technically online platform plus you have the company size behind the specific service, you are regulated as an online platform, and there you gain new obligations as to the content moderation, how decisions can be contested, but also certain design obligations, how you design interfaces for consumers and how you design your services for children. Finally, if you are a service that has 45 million monthly active users in the EU, roughly 10% of the population, then you will be designated by the Commission as a VLOP, very large online platform, in case of search engines, very large search engines, and you will get a special set of obligations that are broader risk management obligations about how you think about risks on your service.